Nobody can ever just enjoy the high of a victory, and nobody can ever mend from a loss. In many ways, that's a good thing. One thing you want to do in sport, very hard to do, easy for me to say, hard thing to do, is you don't want to get too high with the victories, and you don't want the lows to get you too low. You want to kind of try to stay steady. Consistency is so important in sport, but you're a human being. You got these emotions. There's not a lot you can do. They're roller coasters. This sport can be very cutthroat. Go and look at Burns and Woodley again. So Burns beats Woodley instantly. What happens next for Burns? Not, hey, great job. Get home to your family, eat some food, take a week or two off. Stay up late, watch some TV, nothing like this. What's next? Somebody give us an answer. Gilbert, if you can't give us an answer, Dana, you give us an answer. What's next? That's the way the sport works. I don't begrudge it. That's just the way that it works. But the same thing happens for Woodley. Woodley doesn't get to lick some wounds or go, okay, I've been out for 15 months. I got my toe back in the water here. Let's get a new match. What's he going to do now? Should he be retired? Should he be done? Operating within the confines of the sport, whether you like it or not, but the rules that I just laid out, which is what's next? The only thing that matters, what's next? I think that's a harder question for Tyron than it is for Gilbert. Rankings came out this morning. Gilbert Burns is now number 1 in the rankings. I have the foggiest idea who does those or what the validity is, but I can tell you if you can get published, it matters what number is next to your name. And every fighter that does not have the number next to his name that he wants next to his name will tell you that the rankings don't matter. They matter, which is why the fighter knew them, which is why he knew to denounce them. I'm just sharing with you, when you got a 1 next to your name in a forming division, you're a team player who asked for an opportunity after just doing some heavy lifting against a world champion, man. Your wishes are going to be listened to. Will they be granted? They're going to be listened to. So what do you do with Tyron? And I come back to guys like Tyron. I realize I'm a little redundant with the same answer, but guys, it's a great one, which is you change weight classes. You get a fresh coat of paint the second you change weight classes. You are now undefeated in that weight class. You might not have any wins, but you don't have any losses. Look at what it did for Darren Till. Darren Till slides up to 185, takes on Gastelum, beats Gastelum. Little more to the story. Till got into town. He was jet-lagged. Only was in town for 2 days when he's got to walk out and do it. I mean, there was some hero stuff involved there, not to mention he was an underdog, not to mention it was a good fight, and he got the nod, but it also made him an undefeated middleweight. There were no other undefeated middleweights. Adesanya was left without a partner because Paulo Costa was hurt. Rockhold left the division. Weidman left the division. And why those experiments may not have worked out, Weidman and Rockhold were on to the right idea. Either one of them, with a victory, could have been catapulted right into a match with JJ. And it is interesting because when you look at that in hindsight, Weidman was in there with Reyes. This is right before Reyes was Reyes. Rockhold ends up there with Blachowicz. This is right before Blachowicz was Blachowicz. So they drew the right guys that would have catapulted him. And I only offer you that even if that experiment didn't work out, the trajectory and the philosophy was right. Tyron has been talking about moving up to 185. He even got into back and forth publicly with Adesanya as recently as 3 weeks ago. I would just offer for you Tyron Woodley, who's 38 years old and a world champion, and shows that he's in shape. I mean, he just did 25 minutes. It's a big deal. 25 minutes with now the number 1 ranked guy in the world after taking 15 months off. It's a big deal. It would be easier on his body to not have to go down to 170. Guys, don't forget, Tyron Woodley wrestled 174 in college. So at 18 years old, 20 years later, he now weighs 4 pounds less than he weighed. Can any of us say that? Do any of you weigh 4 pounds less than you weighed 20 years ago? And you have to go from 18 to 38. Go from 2 to 22 if you want. Go from 10 to 30. Do the math any which way you want. Do any of us weigh less? So I think that shows us a discipline, a lifestyle, but also likely some struggle. He could take all of that away. Life in general would be happier. He could now put his focus fully into training as opposed to also having to beat the scale. It's just a very real thing. Take it from a guy who's done it. It's just a very real thing. The happiness part is, will that carry over into competition? Take it from a guy who's done it? Nah, not necessarily. There's some push and pull there. There's some give and some take, but I do think Tyron would be one of those guys that could figure that out. And I do think if you're only looking for a trajectory to a championship, a clear path, I do not believe that he's going to find that at 170. It's just too cutthroat. I don't believe Damian Maia done some very heavy lifting. He slid. He lost to Gilbert Burns too. He's not even in the talks. I mean, what a difference a day makes. It's just the way the sport goes. You can get that back as well. You want to talk about what a difference a day makes? Gilbert Burns was number 6 until this morning. He jumped 5 spots. He jumped in front of Masvidal. He jumped in front of Colby. He jumped in front of Leon. I mean, big things can happen. I would suggest for you, if Tyron moved up, not only would that be interesting experiment, not only would it provide for some parity, which would also be a mental relief for him. Get some new guys, get some new blood that you haven't sat around for 10 years thinking about every day. Just get some new faces. I would also suggest for you, I don't know that he's likely to walk into a main event. I think that's a positive. I think with as many 5-round fights as T. Wood has had to do, if he slides into a main card, likely co-main spot, he's now talking about 3 rounds, but that is a significantly different approach. And when you're trying something new and you're in an experimental phase, there is something very wise about doing something hard for less amount of time. So if I'm to give a prediction or a suggestion for you as to what would work and circumvent a lot of time and effort for T. Wood, if the goal is one thing, which is to get back to a world title fight, I believe, and I will maintain, the answer is 185 pounds.